So I invite you to breathe with me. Consciously breathing in. And then allow the exhale to just be just a surrendering into this moment. Something as simple as the breath can be so profound. So breathing in, we breathe in. And breathing out, we just surrender into this moment. Letting the moment be sacred. Notice, if you put your attention on your breath, that your thoughts subside for even this brief period of time. And by attending to the breath, we're attending to the moment. That beautiful space in which the eternal now abides. And so when we step out of time and space that is chronological, that has a past and a future, we enter into this eternal now moment. Just take an empty seat, young lady.
Okay.
Yeah, there you go. And this is a time of stopping. Stop the efforting, stop the thinking, stop the awfulizing, and just be. There's a beautiful Sufi word called kun, and kun means just to be. And so as we rest in the beingness of this presence that we all share, this one breath, one life, one spirit, we feel an intimacy, a coming together. And we can actually say, as we hear a lot in the news, we're in this together. So to be together in the breath, be together in this radical place of stopping, to be together in this pack of smart, safe people who socially distance, who wear their masks, to protect one another. Because we're smart, we're tough, and we're united. We're in this together. We're not victims of a pandemic. We're conscious co-creators of peace and love. The mind wants answers, and sometimes there are no answers. But the soul wants to find meaning. And so as we move into this awareness that we are eternal souls, and our destiny has brought us into this space to be with one another, to listen deeply to that still small voice that abides within all of us, a voice that doesn't get louder, but gets clearer when we become still. And so we start off this Sunday celebration by returning home to the stillness. I am reminded of that scriptural saying, "Be still and know that I am God." So what if the admonition is to be still first? And in that silent place, the language of God is spoken. And it's spoken in a language that oftentimes we can't hear until we become truly still. Resting in the stillness, we are free, which is our true nature. So with gratitude in our hearts, I invite you to open your eyes and give a sigh for the divine. Hildegard of Bingen, give a sigh for the divine. It's all divine. My little Zen calendar is kind of like an oracle for me, and yesterday it said, "I don't know anything." I thought, how profound was that? It's when we think we have all the answers that we're really in hot water. And when we know that we really don't know what's going on this planet, but what we do know is that a shift is taking place. I see it as a cosmic wake-up call for the planet Earth and for us humanoids. It's time for us to wake up. We've been asleep way too long. So for this month of, is this May? Yeah, the last day of May. I've been highlighting this wonderful book by Eckhart Tolle called A New Earth. I've taught it several times here at the center, and he talks about the necessity of awakening at this time on our planet, that the planet is crying out for us to be more conscious, more loving, to have an awareness that everything affects everything else. We're seeing this with the pandemic. It's a global crisis. It's not just localized in one place. And there's a beautiful leveling field that happens. It's imperative that we all wake up, not just the Taiwanese. We all have to wake up. And so the titles of this month, I started off the first Sunday of the month, and the title is, It's Time to Wake Up. Now it's very interesting, you know, the Buddha means the one who awoke. It's not his name. His name was Siddhartha Gautama, but Buddha means the one that awoke. And it's not that the Buddha awoke, it's the Buddha consciousness, which is the Christ consciousness. It awakens within all of us when, strangely enough, we stop identifying with our separate self. So we see these little signs where I live in 5 Points. It says, move from me to we. That's a wake-up call. There is no me that's separate from you. That's the illusion. It's like the waves in the ocean. I'm a better wave than the other wave. No, we're all the ocean of life. And when we know ourselves as this one life, in the science of mind, which is what this center is all about, the Mile High Church has the biggest center in America, Ernest Holmes says there is one life. That life is God's life. That life is perfect. And that life is my life now. So if there's only one life here, it's God's life. And it's perfect by its very nature. Could we know that that's what we are? So what appears to be a separate self here is really the same self that you all are. We're all the same self. We're all breathing the same breath. We all experience the same existential love. It's not a possessive love that attached and makes someone special and someone not. It's just the love of life, the love of God, and that's what we are. So you have to be so humble to know the truth of what we are. I'm reminded of Adam and I were talking early before the service about catching the threads. And I'm going to be doing a new class on June 10th. It's on a Wednesdays. And I'm inviting anybody who wants to be a part of it to join with us. And it's called Catching the Thread. And I call it Catching the Thread because there is this thread of truth. Oliver Wendell Holmes says the truth is incontrovertible. So that thread of truth was there throughout time. But what matters is that we catch that thread when that thread of truth reveals itself. So there's something in us, when it's ready, it awakens from the illusion of separation, from the illusion of me and you, from the illusion that my religion's better than somebody else's religion. Imagine no religion. I wonder if you can. I think there's a Beatles song that goes like that. God has no religion. So when you let go of religion, you can still have spirituality. And spirituality is a universal idea that all people awaken to when they're ready to awaken. So you might ask yourself, is something in me ready to awaken? The fact that you're here would say that something in you wants to wake up to a greater idea of the world and how we should be in this world. When I did that talk at the beginning of the month, I read a little poem called The Quarter Turn. And it was basically a poem that said, I looked at life and life seemed very, very clear. And then I just did a quarter turn and everything changed. I thought, oh my God, I can see clearly now. I used to think it was this way, and now I realize I was wrong. There's something so much greater. You know, in the bookstore over there in the classroom, there's an old newsletter of David Leonard 30 years ago. Raven reminded me, I've been here 31 years. And I said there are 3 phases to life. First, you believe in Santa Claus, phase 1. Second, you don't believe in Santa Claus. Phase 3, you are Santa Claus. Let those who have ears to hear, hear. So we started off by believing that there was a God that was separate. You know, maybe a Christian God or a Buddhist God or a Jewish God or a Muslim God, Allah. And we thought it was something that we had to be win its approval. And then if you were like me, you went through this agnostic stage where religion's the opiate of the people. I don't believe in anything, especially something outside of myself. And then something begins to wake up and you realize, oh my God, It was within us all along. The same presence. It didn't need the construct of a religion. It was this breath within the breath, the self within the self, the essence within the soul. And then you start catching the threads. I heard Goethe, who said, "What is God but a simple essence, the cost of which is nothing less than everything?" I heard that thread of truth. So if God is this simple essence, what is essence? Invisible presence. It's a simple essence. Eckhart Tolle calls it presence, the cost of which is nothing less than everything. In other words, I have to give up my belief system. I have to give up the idea that I have all the answers and go to I don't know. And in that I don't know place, then the beginner's mind begins to dawn. Then we're teachable. Then we can be instructed from within. I was a lost soul, and I think that's part of the journey. You know, I once was lost, and there was a beautiful Marie was sharing in our revealing service this morning how she lost everything. She lost her memory, she lost her story, and with that she lost all that stuff that she'd identified with. How free is that? And then she found something within her that was calling her to a deeper order of being, and she said, I found a new destiny by letting go of everything that I thought I had identified with. But it doesn't matter what Marie had, it's important that we have that direct experience. So in my own personal life story, I was 21 years old, I was in Corfu, Greece. My relationship all through college had broken off. I was going to go to law school, I decided not to go to law school, and I was lost. And a friend I met on that island, he gave me this thread, and it was a saying from Victor Hugo that said, "Be like the bird, who pausing for a while on boughs too slight, feels them give way beneath her, yet sings knowing she hath wings." Well, in that simple little thread, I felt that everything had fallen away, but something in me was resilient and it could move in a new direction. So there, I'm starting to catch the threads early on. And then when I went to New York City and tried to pursue a career and something that had no relevance to my soul, I was just all about making money, and I worked 2 jobs, because that's what you did back then, work 2 jobs so you could spend a lot of money, make a lot of money. And that same friend that gave me that Victor Hugo thread was living in San Francisco, and he wrote me a card. And that was the second thread that he gave me. And it was a saying by Krishnamurti that said, "In oneself lies the whole world. And if you know how to look and to learn, then the door is there and the key is in your hand. But no one gives you the key or the door to open except yourself." So at age 22, still lost, seeking my good outside in the world, I realized that I had to go within. In oneself lies the whole world. Thread number 2. And so once you make a commitment to honoring this something, this invisible essence, the cost of which is nothing less than everything, it will flower in your field of awareness when it's ready to. So it's time to wake up. It's imperative right now, and maybe just in coming here this Sunday morning was your quarter turn, to see life in a different way. The second Sunday on Mother's Day, and I forgot to say Happy Mother's Day on the second Sunday in May, but belated Happy Mother's Day because we're all the mother. I spoke about chaos leading to a higher order. Now, we're definitely in chaotic times. We can feel it. I mean, we have race riots bursting all over the country. And this isn't a race thing that just happened overnight with the murder of a man in Minneapolis. This is a racial situation that's been here ever since I can remember. I'm old enough to remember Rodney King and the riots in Los Angeles. Anybody remember that? When they were beating him in the streets. And he said, "Can't we all just get along?" And I remember I spoke on that Sunday morning, and it irritated people that I would quote Rodney King. Well, we haven't come a lot further, have we? Can't we all just get along and respect one another and love one another? So the irony is that oftentimes the world needs a lot of chaos in order for something to realign into a higher order of being. We were talking in the revealing service, several people have had strokes, I've had a heart attack. And you know, this wasn't the life giving me a punishment. It was truly a wake-up call for every day now is so, so sacred. So what if we approached even those hurdles in life, those moments where we feel lost, where our life seems to be falling apart, and knowing that something is coming out of that. In our last class this week, we did our final class on The Joy of True Meditation by Jeff Foster, and I'm telling you, the students blew me away. And at one stage, this young man did this testimonial, how lost he was. And you could feel him just exposing his soul. He couldn't even read the words. Jody had to read it for him. And after that beautiful expression of his soul and his confusion and the chaos, which of course is leading to a higher order of being, the next person in the class, ironically, played a Kelly Clarkson song called Broken and Beautiful. Not broken, but beautiful, no, broken, and in that broken place, there is beauty arising. So what if the irony is, we're not supposed to put this life back together the way it was? When they say get back to normal, there is no normal. We're going to create a new normal, and it's going to be one where we're wearing masks, and we're not going to be shaking hands all over the place. And I'm a big hugger, so I'm going to have to learn to hug people with my eyes. So I'm embracing all of you with my eyes right now. Virtual hugs galore. And that's because I want to be smart, I want to be tough, and I want to be united in this. And we're all going to be in this together. So yeah, chaos leads to a higher order. Can we take responsibility then in our own life? Because we're all forced into a form of chaos right now. I love what Jean said, that she's using this forced isolation to call her brother, who she hadn't spoken with in 2 years. What a great idea is that? That we can use this time in a productive way, saying, I want a higher order of compassion, of camaraderie, of connectedness, and maybe it needs to be broken right now so that life can reform itself in a different way. On the third week, I asked the question, who is the experiencer? I studied with a man named Arjun Ardak, who came out of the Ramana Maharshi lineage, and on this retreat that I studied with him, we focused on one question the whole time I was at the retreat. It must be a great question. And the question was, who is experiencing this moment right now? And you could change it up and say, what is experiencing this moment right now? And that's all you lived was that question. So if what is experiencing this moment is your egoic self, Emerson calls it the finite self. And Emerson says it's only the finite self that wails and suffers, but this infinite presence lies stretched in smiling repose at the center of all life. So what is experiencing this moment right now? Is it the mind? Is it the judge? Is it the critic? Is it the anxious one? Not that there's anything wrong with that, but if you stay with the anxious one or the critic or the mind. Adam, could you give me a little glass of water? I've got a tickle in my throat. Thank you. Or is it this abiding peace? So who is the experiencer? What is the experiencer? On Saturday nights before I do the Sunday service, I seek inspiration on YouTube. There's so many wonderful teachers out there, and I turned on Jeff Foster, his beautiful interview about the deepest acceptance, which is this book that I've taught here at the center, and that's the title of today's talk, The Deepest Acceptance. And he said, when we realize that anything that arises in our life has already been allowed, and you know it's been allowed because it's arising, well then our job is to be this capacity to accept whatever it is that's arising. So if it's a criticism, if it's a fear, if it's a judgment. You know, Peter Alexander was in one of the White House press conferences, and he dared to ask the question, Mr. President, how are you addressing the fear that's gripping this country during this pandemic? And the president, in his true nature, said, that's a stupid question. Next. Well, it isn't a stupid question. Fear does arise. And so Jeff Foster said, when fear arises, it's because it's already been allowed. Yes, there's fear. My little pug, we were talking about Susan and her dog that's getting older and can't walk. Maybe it was Valentine's weekend. I'm coming to church on a Sunday. Trey is up in New York City with his sisters. And that Sunday, my little pug collapsed. And I called Jody. I said, I don't know what to do. And she says, bring him into the center. And sure enough, he had a herniated disc in his neck. I didn't know for 3.5 days till they had the MRI. And I felt totally out of control. I felt totally lost. And yet, it was, and I was afraid. That's why I'm using this example. I was afraid for him. I didn't know if he'd live or die. I knew that I was there. I was responsible. I was his caregiver. And what I learned in that was I couldn't fix him, because we have a fix-it world. We got to fix the problem. It was not a problem to be fixed. I couldn't really even help him because I was told that he had to urinate and have bowel movements, but he was paralyzed from the neck down. So here I am standing out in the garden, and Jody was helping me. One of us would hold him in the air. He's a hefty little pug, and we were squeezing his bladder and squeezing, and for naught. So then I had to realize in my impotence, in my fragile, fearful, worried place, that all I could do was serve him. And the way I served him was I lay on the floor next to him, I talked to him, I took an eyedropper. He couldn't drink water, he couldn't eat food, but I could drop little drops of water in his mouth, he could still use his tongue. I even got someone to get me some CBD oil. Somehow I thought that might help with the pain, so I'm self-diagnosing. I'm giving CBD oil with some water, and I think it helped. Yeah, so we don't have to be always Mr. Together or Miss Together. We can actually honor whatever it is that we're experiencing and accept it. Because there's a lot of fear out there on the planet. There's a lot of anxiety, there's a lot of confusion, and we really don't know. You know, several people here are compromised like myself. You know, when you're older, when you've had a condition, you probably shouldn't be here in this room. But you came because, as Jody so beautifully reminded me, we need the pack. We need each other. We're pack animals. I need to see your beautiful faces out there. So the fourth weekend, which was last, I talked about awakened doing. This is right at the end of Eckhart Tolle's book, The New Earth. And he says awakened doing is when who you are, which is this awake self, this peaceful presence, when you're doing your being, that's awakened doing. And he says there's three modalities that accompany someone who's living life from an awake place. He says, first of all, they're living in acceptance of what is. There's a beautiful saying that says all suffering is a resistance to what is. So when we stop resisting, we know we have a pandemic, and it's here to stay. It's going to be here for a while. So when we accept it, then we don't have to suffer. Then we learn to be mindful and tough and smart and united and wear our masks and get those sanitizers and make a little science out of it. So the first thing is acceptance. The second modality, he says, to do awakened doing is there's a sense of enjoyment. You're really focused on what you do. Adam came in last week and we were changing the light bulbs and the things, and we realized that it wasn't the light bulbs that were out, it was the ballast that was broken. And as I'm handing bulbs and he's changing, he says to me, "Isn't this fun?" I said, "That's awakened doing." Who would say changing light bulbs would be fun? But when you are fully present in the moment and you're engaged, there's a sense of joy that's there. So you can chop your vegetables with joy. You bring mindfulness into how you garden. You bring mindfulness into how you fold the laundry and how you walk the dog. There's a sense of joy, and you could call it the seeming mundane. The third modality Eckhart Tolle launches us into is a sense of enthusiasm. Could we be enthusiastic about our doing? Enthusiastic about coming here. I'm teaching a new class. It starts on June 10th, and it's called Catching the Thread, and I'm enthusiastic about that because I'm not the teacher. And by that I mean there's something that moves through me that will be the teacher. And to catch the thread, I'm using a lovely book called For the Love of God, where 26 enlightened beings offer their gift of awareness. Now my job is to catch the thread of His Holiness the Dalai Lama when he says, "My religion is kindness." Or to catch the thread from a Mother Teresa who says there are no great acts done with love, but only little acts done with great love. Could I catch that thread, what they're really pointing toward, and know that it's not her mind that had that, or his mind that had that, but it's the one mind that once again is revealing itself, and when we hear it, it's because it's there already. When I first came to a center like this 40 years ago, I was sitting in the back of the room, and I was hearing things spoken that I knew already. So what if the truth, and the Greek word for truth is that which unhides itself. When the truth is ready to be known, and Adam and I were discussing, what if some people can't just go there with you? I said, everybody's doing the very best they can. I wasn't always ready to hear the truth, because they say that truth will set you free, but my teacher used to say, but first it pisses you off. People don't want to hear the truth, that you're caused to your own suffering, that nobody did anything to you, that nobody's responsible for your feelings. People don't want to hear that. Yes, you are responsible for my feelings. No, I'm responsible for my feelings, not you. That's the truth. Do we want to hear it? So to speak the truth will oftentimes irritate the world, but there comes a time when you cannot speak a lie anymore. I remember when I was in 9th grade and I was studying Hamlet, and Polonius said to his son Laertes before he went off to Denmark, I think he was going off to England, he was in Denmark, and he said to Laertes, his son, he said, "To thine own self be true, and it must follow as the night the day, thou canst not be false to any man." Now I'm in 9th grade, and I'm hearing Polonius saying this to his son, and something in me, that truth thread said, yes, you have to be true to yourself. To thine own self be true, and it must follow the night the day, thou canst not be false to anyone. So what would it look like in your life if you were being true to yourself? If you followed a spiritual path that fed your soul instead of shamed you and said you're an abomination in God's eyes and you're born in sin. I remember as a little boy questioning that whole idea of born in sin, and I was told to accept it on blind faith. Thank God I had a father who said, question everything. So I had a mother who said, don't question anything. So between this and this, I got to spend a little confusion in growing up. But now I know that Dad was right. And where Mom was right is Mom had a deep devotion to form and structure. And then on her deathbed, it was so funny, my little sister said, "Mom, have you been saved?" And she looked at my little sister and said, "Of course I have." And she was ready to leave. So what if, yeah, so that was last week, Awaken Doing Your Being, and this week we're talking about deepest acceptance. Since I extolled Eckhart Tolle, let me describe at the very end of the book what this whole new world would look like, and see if it feels like something that is relevant for you. It certainly is for me. And he quotes this, he says, and he's quoting scripture, "And I saw a new heaven and a new earth," writes the biblical prophet. "The foundation for a new earth is a new heaven, which is the awakened consciousness. As within, so without." So the world will awaken when we awaken. And it requires a new heaven, a new consciousness in order to have a new earth. He says the earth, which is external reality, is only its outer reflection. The arising of the new heaven, and by implication the new earth, are not future events that are going to make us free. There's the illusion of time. There is no time. This awakening has to happen right now. Not someday. My prince will come right now. The truth is relevant right now. So, he says, nothing is going to make us free because only the present moment can make us free. The truth is we're already free. It was Thomas Jefferson that said, God hath made the mind of man free. So if you can say that divinely our mind is free, then where are we not free? Where are we bound? In opinion, in judgment, in story, in all that kind of stuff. And we can see where we're bound. So he said, only in the present moment can we be free. That realization is the awakening itself. Awakening as a future event has no meaning, because awakening is the realization of presence now. Now. Ram Dass's first book, years and years ago in the 60s, Be Here Now. How simple that thread was. And when he went through his long evolutionary process and his guru stroked him and he couldn't speak, his last book was called Be Love Now. And they just had a big memorial service for him, and all his friends came, and they said Ram Dass had evolved to the place where he was love itself. He would meet a stranger on the street, and he was meeting his own beloved. Everywhere, wheresoever I look, I see the face of love. That's because love had flowered within him. That was the evolution of his consciousness. So they're all saying it's time to evolve into what Gene Houston, or what Barbara Marx Hubbard calls the Homo Universalis, the universal human. We started off as, I think it was Homo erectus, man could stand. Then we became Homo Neanderthal. Then we became Homo sapien. Then we became Homo sapien sapien, and now it's time for us to become Homo Universalis, to evolve as a species where we come together as one in service, because we can't fix it, but in service to life itself. In the form of a pug, in my case, in the form of a pandemic, in the form of bringing light to Alabama. I'm surprised that I ever succeeded here, Barbara. It's still a myth to me. Awakening as a future event has no meaning, because awakening is the realization of presence right now. So this new heaven, the awakened consciousness, is not a future state to be achieved. A new heaven and a new earth are arising within each one of us this moment. He said, what did Jesus tell his disciples? He said, heaven is right here in the midst of you. On the Sermon on the Mount, he said, blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. The meek are the humble. And what does this mean? He says, the meek are the egoless ones. Blessed are the meek. Blessed are the humble. 8th Psalm, what is man that thou art mindful of him? Thou hast made him a little lower than the angels and have crowned him with honor and glory. Do you know how humble you have to be to know that we are here to glorify the beloved by our life expression, by who we are? And then we do who we are. I'm just a very open-hearted, loving person. That's it. And I garden. And to do that in a way that's in service to the awakening of humanity, to that same loving presence. It's not a complicated, it's a very, very simple thing. And people want to make it complicated. He goes on to say, meek means humble. The meek are the egoless. They are those who have awakened to their essential true nature as consciousness, and they recognize that essence in all others and all life forms is the same essence. One life, God's life, perfect in all its many, many forms. That's what we are. He says they live in a surrendered state and so feel their oneness with the whole and the source. In this teaching, Science of Mind, there are 3 levels that it's taught on. The first level, and it's the lowest level, is the mental science. Change your thinking, change your life. You create your reality by what you think. And you know, that might have served in the 1930s when we needed to have a more proactive, positive way of looking at life. The second level is what they call the religious science, where you recognize there's a power for good. There's this universal power that's done unto you as you believe, and you can use it. And so then we're using this religious science, we're using our mind to co-create with this power, if you will. But ultimately we have to evolve to the last place, which is the mystical science, which says that there's only one here, and it's all one big whole. And it is that perception of the wholeness of life that is all healing. So it's about a shift in perception, to move out of the self-help teaching of me and creating a better illusion to the realization that there is no me to help. There is only that which we all share to awaken within all of us. And they're all saying the same thing. So he said, these awakened beings, they live in a surrendered state and so feel the oneness. A surrendered state instead of a controlling state. The ego wants to be in control, wants to feel safe and secure, wants to have a plan. The soul wants meaning and recognizes it doesn't know because it's not trapped in its head anymore. They embody the awakened consciousness that is changing all aspects of our life on the planet right now, including nature, because life on Earth is inseparable from the human consciousness that perceives and interacts with it. This is the sense in which the meek will inherit the Earth. A new species is arising on this planet. It is arising now, and you are it. The last words of the book. There is a new species arising on the planet right now, and you are it. When I studied with the Sufis, I remember I did a 10-day silent retreat. Well, it wasn't silent because the Sufi teacher spoke, but at the very end he closed with the Hopi prophecy and the Hopi Indians, and they talked about how we are all journeying down a river. They spoke in metaphor, and they say, notice who's in the river with you and who's on the sidelines. And they say it's very important to keep your head above water and to not look back, but to look forward. They say at this time in our history, we cannot afford to take anything personally. In other words, it's not about you. It's never been about you. It's about this life force that's evolving and emerging through each one of us. Notice who's in the stream with you. Keep your head above water, move forward, don't look back. Because, and it closes the prophecy, because you are the ones that we've been waiting for. Eckhart Tolle says the same thing. This Homo Universalis, this new higher order of being, has to evolve through each one of us. And by coming together, you know, even Jesus said, when 2 or more are gathered in my name, meaning in my nature, I am there. It's the nature of the awakened one, the one life, awake to itself in the many. And then we potentiate one another. 2 or more are gathered. That's why I love doing the class with Jody on the Zoom, because with her energy right there, it's like it potentiates it. When Glory G and I would do satsang, the 2 of us together would potentiate it, and things would happen. And I can honestly tell you, I don't know what's going to happen. We've had so many miraculous healings in our satsangs and our generational healings, and we didn't go in there with this idea what it was going to look like. We just opened to the suffering of the planet. We created a safe space for it to be embraced and realized, and then magic begins to happen. And it does feel like magic. You know, when Humphrey came back from being paralyzed, it felt like magic. You know, and I realized, my God, we need each other. I needed that neurologist. I needed Jody to give me she told me, she said, because I felt totally helpless, and I was kind of a basket case. And that's good, to have the deepest acceptance around that. And she had the wisdom to say, now you know what it's like to be a mother. I didn't eat for 3.5 days when he was lying paralyzed on the floor. I couldn't sleep. I wanted to do the right thing. And I realized that I just had to ride it out with him. That was the right thing, to have the deepest acceptance that there is a divine order and it will play itself out as it's supposed to play. So now we're coming to today's talk. It sure took a long time to get there, didn't I? It's the deepest acceptance. And as I said earlier, when I watched Jeff last night, his life is his message. And he was a mess. It completely fell apart, and maybe it needed to fall apart. He went to Cambridge, and he was supposed to be a neuroscientist. But then when his life fell apart, strangely enough, it took him to a discovery of himself. And he said his father, who was very patriarchal, who had all the answers, who wanted his son to be a reflection of him, the grace had it that the father got Alzheimer's. And he said, as my father began to lose his capacity to think, he said, all of a sudden, I became like his father. Because he would say, Jeff, what is this? What does it mean? And said, so in the final years of my father's life, I had this intimate relationship with an old man who became like a little child. And he said, I finally got to know the perfection of him in his imperfect state. Not his erudite state, but in his humbleness, he showed me his soul. And so Jeff, he said, I used to believe in positive thinking, and that was the answer. Turn away from negative thoughts, positive thoughts. Now I realize that those negative thoughts, they arise to be met and to be held. They don't arise so that we can shame them and say, you're wrong, I shouldn't feel you. And so at the very end of the book, just like at the end of Eckhart Tolle's, he kind of creates an image of what it would look like if you were living in the deepest acceptance. And I want to give you a flavor of how he writes. He said, if we can face our present experience and find the deepest acceptance there, we are free. Now, we've got a lot going on the planet. Can we have the deepest acceptance and just allow it? It's happening anyway. He goes on to say, in recognizing yourself as this wide open space in which all the waves of life appear. He uses the metaphor of the ocean and the wave. And, you know, Jesus said, I speak, but they do not hear. And so he would speak in parable. You know, and if you want to really understand the teachings of Jesus, read the parables, because they're all pointing to something that the logical mind can't grasp. So he does the same thing with the idea of the ocean. He said, we think we're these waves on the ocean. There's a David wave and a Gigi wave and a Raoul wave and an Adam wave. And he says, but when you realize it, when the wave surrenders back into the ocean, all of a sudden the wave goes, oh my God, I'm the ocean itself. I appear to be a Barbara, or I appear to be a David. But when I really can surrender, I know that I am this oceanic presence, this vast, spacious field of awareness that individualizes in the individual, but really is not the truth of what we are. What we are is that. So he's going on this ocean thing, and he says it like this, in recognizing yourself as this wide open space in which all the waves appear and disappear, as an intimate vastness in which all thoughts, sensations, and feelings come and go, it becomes a lot clearer that what awakening is really all about. In recognizing yourself as the vast and intimate open space of awareness. It was Locke Kelly who wrote a book called Shift into Freedom, and his metaphor was the sky. And he said, I used to like to think that I was this nice little fluffy white cloud, and my job was to keep my cloud all white and fluffy when everybody else was dark and turbulent. And he said, and then one day I fell out of my cloud, and I went, oh my God, I'm the sky. I'm not the cloud. It's the same idea. We're not the separate self. We are the space in which all arises. That's the Christ consciousness. Seek it first, Jesus said. So in recognizing yourself as this vast, intimate, open space of awareness, it's no longer a question of something called me becoming more awakened over time, or reaching a total integration in the future, for it is seen that, from the perspective of who I really am, every wave that appears right now is already integrated with the ocean. Every wave is already intimate with what I am. So could we accept all of it? The fear, the confusion, the pandemic, the race riots, it's all arising in consciousness to be met with equanimity. Equanimity means it's not one way or the other, that it all has value. So it's not a question of me moving toward an endpoint of total integration into the future. This is the dream of the seeker, who always lives in a story of time and spiritual achievement. It's always, always a question of recognizing the integration of present experience being right now. Right now, it's it, you know. But Jesus said, seek the kingdom of heaven. And when is the kingdom of heaven? It's right now. The kingdom of heaven is now. And the word that Jesus used for kingdom in Aramaic was Malkutha. Malkutha means the sovereign counsel of God, or the direct revelation of truth, the thread of truth. So he says, seek that direct revelation of truth, and it's always right now. You know. And they said, heaven is not up there in the sky. He said, if it were in the sky, the birds would get there first. Heaven's not in the ocean, but the fish would get there first. I tell you, it's within you, and it's all around you, but you don't see it. Now, when it awakens, that's all you see. So he's saying essentially the same thing. It already is. And it's about recognizing that it's right here, right now. It's about awakening to the completeness and the deep acceptance of this moment as it is. Adam said earlier, he said, I want to go as deep as you can go. And I said, but the deep is right now. It's not something we're going to do in the future. Deep right now. Deep right now. And when deep calls upon deep, deep responds. It's the same deep. When I'm lying on the floor, holding Humphrey in my arms, he's not thinking thoughts. He's surrendered and trusting that I'm going to do the right thing. And all I could do was hold him. Now, in the profound simplicity of that, what if that's all we're here to do to each other, is to hold each other? When I studied with Jeff Foster in Colorado, they gave us a little acronym that's kind of been my mainstay and helped me throughout all this troubled times we're living in. And the acronym is RAIN. And the R stands for recognize what's arising in you. You know what? If it's an egoic thought, if it's the pain body arising, just recognize it. Oh, there's that fear again. There's that anxiety. There's that confusion. What am I going to do? There's that old pattern of not feeling seen or heard. Just recognize it, whatever it is. What I recognize is that I have a little wounded boy in me that was shamed. And so for 65 years, I had exiled him, and he showed up in Colorado. And when he came, he says, don't abandon me again. He's the one that was afraid and the one that was confused. He needed the adult me to let him come in and not shame him and say you were wrong. So recognize whatever it is that's arising within you. And then the A stands for allow it. No longer shame it, no longer treat it away, no longer try to put a positive spin on it. Let him be as sad as he wants to be. You know what I've discovered with sadness? If you really go into grief, it always takes you into love. I've lost so many people over the years. Even my beloved daughter, my dog, she was like my daughter. Today someone called and they were talking about baby Speck, and I still felt that grief was still there. And I wonder if it ever really does go away, or if it just, every time I feel the sadness over losing somebody I really love, it takes me into the love. The love never went anywhere. So what if the sadness takes you to love? Then we don't have to make the sadness go away. Yeah, I'm going to always be sad. I'm going to always miss that little face resting on my knee, looking up at me with such devotion. When I had the heart attack and I fell on the bed, I landed on baby Speck. And I remember thinking, if this is how I'm going to go in the arms of love. I actually felt that. Of course, I didn't go. But those are just beautiful memories to show you what love's all about. Love never dies. So he goes on to finally say here, there is only here and now is where life is. Life heals itself through you. And lastly, can you admit that who you really are is vast enough to contain all of life, the good and the bad? It's not about having dualistic thinking, My friend Helen Street used to say they gave away all the secrets on the first page of the Bible. I love it when someone says something like that. They gave away all the secrets. First of all, it says, and God made this, and God made that, and it was good, and it was very good. So when man fell from grace, and Eden represents, it's an allegory, it represents a consciousness of oneness, what he's talking about. Once we started to eat, once we ate from the tree of judgment, calling this good and this bad, we could no longer be in Eden. Eden representing the consciousness of oneness, because we said this thought is good, this thought is bad, this attitude is good, this attitude is bad, and then we move into duplicity, and it's taken the evolution of consciousness to realize it's all good, it's all God, even the dark stuff. So they're talking about bringing the darkness into the light. Can you admit that who you really are is vast enough to contain all of life? So look at your life then, finally, as an invitation. And the invitation is everywhere, especially in the dark stuff. We have support groups here at the center throughout the week, and they're invitations to meet the darkness. So recognize it, allow it, integrate it, and I didn't give you the rest of the rain, and then nurture it. So recognize that fear is arising. Allow the fear, allow the sadness, allow the confusion. Integrate it by saying you have a place in me now. You're no longer going to be exiled into the far lands calling it wrong. Yeah, there's a little sad boy that's always going to miss his dog. And when he arises, I get to nurture that. So what if it's all about nurturing? Nurturing ourselves, especially the vulnerable parts of ourselves. And we get to do this for each other. Ruby says we're here to walk each other home. You know, when Reva's down and low, I can nurture her. When I'm down and low, she can nurture me. Because that's what we do for one another. We take care of one another because we are each other. So he says the invitation is everywhere. It's there in the joy and it's there in the pain. It's there in the boredom and it's also there in the excitement. It's there in the grief and it's there in the ecstasy. It's in the sweetness and in the bitterness. It's at your birth and it's at your deathbed. The invitation is here in every single moment of this precious, fragile gift that we call life, that we so easily take for granted. And right now, even as you read these words, it's gently calling you back to itself. It's gently calling you back to itself. Be still and know that I am God. I was sharing with Adam, I found a Rumi quote the other day that it's another thread that keeps working on me. And in this statement of Rumi's, he said, I am the vastness. Why do I settle for a little apartment? You know, meaning a small consciousness. And then he said, be still, speak less, and then find the language of the eternal. When you speak less, when there's less of you there, the language of the eternal reveals itself in ways that can be felt. We taught Richard Roy here a little book called Just This, and he said, you know, our mind wants answers. Our mind wants to be in control, wants a strategy, but the soul wants to find meaning. Now, what if we could make that essential shift into this soulful place, that even when the hardships come, and the darkness comes, and the painful moments come, and the sadness comes, that the soul can find meaning in that. Otherwise, life would be rather boring, wouldn't it be? If it's just about feeling good, and having those addictive things that make life so great, eat the food I want, the drink I want, or what if it's those moments when we fall apart, like Marie said, I lost everything, and yet I got my soul. When I was a little boy growing up in South Dakota, we would go to the Lutheran church. My mother was Lutheran, my dad was Episcopal, and then he evolved to Unitarian. So we were kind of schizophrenic as kids going to all these different churches. But I do remember hearing as a little boy that thread of truth. And the thread of truth said, what does it profit man if he gains the whole world and loses his soul? And something in that little boy heard, there is this thing called soul. It's our eternal nature. It's the space in which the Christ lives. What if that could be the priority in this lifetime? To honor that soul. Because that soul is eternal. We're going to take it with us. Or it's going to take us with it. And so what if we have this lifetime to experience the depth and the intimacy with this invisible, eternal aspect of ourselves now? Not someday when you get through all the classes or whatever, when you find that right and perfect teacher, but right now in the midst of a pandemic, we have the opportunity to be wide awake and to say that we're not going to be on the battlefield anymore fighting this, but we're going to be there bringing the peace, bringing the awareness that a higher order is going to come out of this chaotic stuff. and that we're going to take our spiritual practice as the necessary workout that we need in order to be in service to the world, in service to the love, in service to the one, in service to the peace. We're not here to fix the world. The world doesn't need to be fixed. It's broken, and it's beautiful. I mean, we can actually say our world is broken. The environment, I mean, these are scary times. Young people realize it. Us old folks, we haven't done such a great job. I remember growing up in the 50s, and they didn't even have an idea of environmental movement. And I was a Boy Scout, and we would go on our little rafting trips, Cub Scout, Boy Scout. And I remember the rivers were so polluted because we didn't have a consciousness then about not polluting the rivers. We've come a long way since I was in the 50s, but we have to go even further. We have to recognize that this is sacred. One of the, I was thinking of the class that I'm teaching called Catching the Thread, and so many threads that I've caught over my lifetime. And when we do this class, and you're all invited to do it, it's on Wednesday, the opportunity is to awaken at a deeper level, and it's always a now experience. So I was reflecting on when I studied with Thich Nhat Hanh. He's so relevant today because he said the miracle is not to walk on water, like Jesus was reputed to have done, not to walk on fire. We have all these fire walking things that they do, but to walk on the earth where every step is a caress and a blessing of the sacredness of this planet. He said that's the miracle. Now that was a little wake-up call for me. Thich Nhat Hanh, when I saw him, it was at a very vulnerable time in my life. My mother had died very suddenly, and my teacher had died the week later, and the week after that I'm sitting at his feet in Scutney, Vermont, and I'm grieving. And this little tiny man comes out, and he does this thing with his hand, and he goes back and forth over his heart. And he said, all of life is a transmission. And he had these long, pregnant pauses. And he said, there is a transmitter, there is a receiver, and there is that which is transmitted. And then he said, your parents do nothing less than transmit themselves to you. They live in you. Now, my mother was a week dead. Your teachers do nothing less than transmit themselves. They live in you. And that whole 10 days of silence, I felt them smiling at me from every flower. It's like Adam was talking about soul contracts. Once you've had this deep connection, who they are never dies. I met Jody Rutenberg after her friend Lindsay was in a car accident. I never met Lindsay in form, but I know Lindsay as something really intimate to me because Jody so embodies the transmission that the two of them had. What if in this mystery of belonging to the universe that we're so much more multidimensional than we realize we are? So the invitation, and I like that he said that the invitation is to be teachable, is to be receptive, is to be this capacity for life to awaken anew in each one of us. You know, when the Bible says, behold, I make all things new, it doesn't say I make retreads. We don't need a retread religion. We need a new spiritual way of looking at life where oneness is the primary theme and that we're here to be living embodiments of the awakened presence, period. We get to carry the peace into the chaotic times. Anne-Marie is like a saving grace to me. When I get nervous and upset, she says, we're going to get through this. Maybe it's because she was in the Navy, but she says it with such conviction, I believe her. Maybe that's what we get to say. You know, when a little kid's afraid, you say, it's going to be fine. President Obama gave a tribute to the graduates of 2020. And in his gentle ways, he said to the young 2020 graduates, he said, as a country, we've been through slavery. He says, we've been through a civil war. We've been through 2 world wars, a Great Depression. We've been through 9/11, and he said, and we always came through it better because we were there for each other. So what if we could know that whatever is going on, it's so in order to create a new world, we have to create this new consciousness, and that has to begin within us. I like when Marie said, there was a greater destiny calling me. My life wasn't what I thought it was. And you know, it upset her daughter when she said, Mom, I want the old mom back. People want you to be the way they think you should be. But when this new order of being comes, we don't really have a choice because it has us then. And it's going to use us. And could we say to the universe, and this has been my prayer to God, to the universe, is this life belongs to you, use it as you will. How can I serve in the highest way, whatever that is? You know, and it's the little things. It truly is the little things. My teacher, Llewellyn Bunley, he's a Sufi teacher, and he's written a new book called Spiritual Ecology. His first book, Spiritual Ecology 1, was how the planet is dying. And it's a gloom and doom thing about the environment, and I had to put it aside. But all these young people asked him, what can we do? What can we do? Knowing that we're in this existential imperative right now. And so he wrote this new book, and it was 10 little things we can do to bring the sacred into our life. And he says, the world is crying out for the sacred. He said, could we put the sacred into our cooking? You know, when something is made with love, you receive it with love. You taste the love. That's why I love homemade anything. Barbara's homemade a little blanket and a little hat for Jody's soon-to-be grandson. You know that all the love that went into those stitches are going to go onto that little baby. That's putting the sacred into the mundane. He says, put the sacred into your walking. After the pug was paralyzed and he came back, from what I thought was his demise, he can't really walk very well. He walks like a drunken sailor. He kind of falls over. But he can still walk and he can do his business, but he can't really do his walks around the neighborhood. So as fate would have it, he got a stroller. And within a month, he's sitting regally in his stroller, looking around at his domain, because, you know, when life gives you lemons, you make lemonade. And so we put the sacred back into the walking. We love walking him. And Bert, the old dog, he walked right by his little stroller, you know, I'm here to take care of him. And so you got one dog prancing along and the other dog riding along. And we got the BMW of strollers. Trey ordered it from Canada. It costs a lot of money, but you know what? He's worth it. It has shock absorbers and the whole 9 yards. It's called the Dogger. Gene's shaking his head. No, it's a fancy. No. Yeah, so what if we could put the sacred back into the mundane? Let me do a little reflection in, because it's getting time to departe. And remember that life is an invitation to be here now. So we open to that invitation and we say yes. That beautiful word, yes. I am open and receptive to this peace that passeth all understanding. It's there, it's always been there, even when my mind is confused. I am open and receptive to the love. All I have to do is reflect on an object of love, let's say my dog, or my beloved community here. And then I allow the image of the love to dissolve, and the love is still there. And so what if we open to this invitation that life is always presenting to us in every moment? I am open and receptive to the grace of this moment. In the midst of chaos, I know that it is the doorway to a higher order of being. So I say yes to chaos. I am open to being the experiencer who lies stretched in smiling repose, who doesn't have to wail and complain, but knowing that life will give me exactly what I need. And so when life seems to be taking everything away, I observe what is trying to give birth in me. It's truly an invitation for a new order of being, a new life, and we are the way it happens here. So the universe has given us an invitation this Sunday morning. And through lowly listening, and through a willingness to be fully present, it begins to grow within our being, just like a seed would grow in the soil. And then through surrender and by being meek, we inherit the earth, by being humble. I myself am nothing, as Jesus would say. It's this presence within that does the work. And so when we know that we are nothing, but this ocean of love is everything, then the tide can seem to be different, but the ocean is the same. It's the ocean of love. And we are that ocean. And so we allow the breath to breathe us. And we notice that the breath is conscious, even sometimes when we're not. And that this life is conscious, that we all share. And sometimes we go into a stupor, we forget who we are. We forget that we're life itself. The one life, God's life, perfect. And as we surrender this perception that we're separate, then that which is awake awakens. It's like the sky awakens within the cloud, and the ocean awakens within the drop, and the love awakens within the heart. And that spacious, vast consciousness awakens within our mind. And we no longer dwell on thoughts and beliefs, but we are the background in which they arise. We are that same awareness. Rest is that. And now if you're comfortable saying the heart salutation, which is how we usually end our service, say after me, I honor you.
I honor you.
I respect you.
I respect you.
I love you.
I love you.
You are an aspect of myself.
You are an aspect of myself.
The beloved in me bows to the beloved in you.
The beloved in me bows to the beloved in you.
In this place we are one.
In this place we are one.
Take it just a second to feel that oneness, that connection, that respect, that love, that honor. And know that as you sow, so shall you reap. It's all so simple and also profound all at the same time. With gratitude, we let this beautiful day unfold with cheerful expectancy, knowing that we are in this together. Open your hands, wiggle your fingers, say, and so it is.
And so it is.
Thank you.